guys, it's good to be back. Also, I feel really rusty, so I'm just going to jump in and shotgun approach the whole thing. I'll also put timestamps on the bottom, so I'll give you a list of what I'm going to talk about, but also if I add anything, it'll be timestamped below. So in my last video, I had suggested that if anybody had any questions or had any video requests to please let me know and that I would do them. I think I can answer them in a Q&A right now rather than do its own video, but if you want more, you want a bigger video on something, then I'm happy to do that. So I'll do Q&A first, and then I've got a quick book giveaway that I want to put out there. And here's some other topics. The Waldorf live education, we did the Kalevala main lesson this last month. I'll talk about math, reading, our 100 list, a little bit more on the nonfiction list, the new books or the books that we've read this last month, our attendance, how that's going. I like to show that every once in a while. And also where we are with unit studies, because I had done a unit studies video at the very beginning of the year, and I kind of like to keep up of showing you there was that plan, and then this is where we are with the plan. And if it's any different, I think that that's helpful. Art, creative writing, and yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. So let's start with the book giveaway. When I was a para a couple of years ago at Morgan's school, I had bought a whole bunch of books for one of my little reading circles, and I donated most of them to our school library, but I've still got one set here. I kept two sets, one for me and one for Morgan if we wanted to read them together. And so I'm giving these away. If anybody would like them, please let me know down in the comments, and in a couple of weeks I will compile those names and we can pull them out of a jar during the next video, and the person whose name it is, just let me know what your address is and I'm happy to send them to you. So these are, the first set is Warriors Into the Wild, the first 6 books, which is its own set by Aaron Hunter. And so if you like these books, we loved them. If you like them, then let me know and I'm happy to send them to you. Now let's do the Q&A. How do you plan to teach study skills? Do you regularly review what you've learned earlier? The answer is yes, we absolutely do. And in fact, here's some ways that we study and review what we've done. We spend very, very little time with fill in the blank, or, like spelling lists or something where you just review and go over and over the same thing. We don't do it that way. It doesn't help Morgan. So what I have found is narration is amazing. Discussion, talking, bantering back and forth, talking about the subject that's on our minds, that's on our table. Doing unit studies, which is where Waldorf really is helpful because their main lessons are essentially unit studies, where you hold on a subject for a good portion of time and you explore that subject, and you can go kind of off subject a little bit or where that takes you, and then bring yourself back to it. And the time that you are studying in that regard, where you're reading and narrating and writing and all of the art, and it's all original. There's no fill in the blank, there's no multiple choice where the child passively takes or chooses the answer where they can see, well, that's clearly the answer, but maybe they wouldn't have been able to come up with it on their own if they weren't provided objective tests rather than a subjective. And so we do a lot of subjective learning around here, where you come up with what you've learned, you recreate it in your mind and in your own words, in your own art, and on the paper. So creative writing is huge. In fact, this is one of the best things that I have ever done in homeschool so far, and that is given Morgan. We had started with 1 sentence a day when she was having trouble in the beginning with a lot of the writing, where things were tiring her out. She's come a long way now, and she writes a good couple of pages, 2 to 3 pages a day in this book. And these are things that it's either creative writing ideas for a short story, but also what I've noticed is she's starting to write out some of the things that she knows. She was writing about the Kalevala in here and interpreting it, or placing her interpretation into her writing about it. And that's essentially the beginning of an essay. She has written an essay in here without her knowing that she was doing it. She did it. And so I think that our organic way of learning and remembering stuff is a fantastic way to study. But on top of that, I think study habits come from 2 things: time management and mind management. And we focus on those here. But a third thing is emulation. And Morgan sees me study. I study. I read books. I annotate them. I complain about them to my husband, or she hears me talk about them and he talks about his books and what he's reading. And so she literally sees us read, annotate, take notes, argue, really like debate things or discuss things. And she hears us narrating and then listening to the other person. And so she's really becoming part of that. But then from there is time management. And my job is to show Morgan how I do my own time management and to help her with hers until she gets her own. And she does. So she's starting to, I cannot tell you how important this is. Morgan's got her own, and you guys have seen this. In it is what she's supposed to do for the week and for the day. So she's getting really good at knowing when she wants to take her own break. She knows what is expected of her. She knows how much of a thing she needs to do each day. And she doesn't have to ask to take a break. She just gets up and takes a break. Or maybe she wants lunch early, or maybe she wants lunch later so that she can finish a thing. But this is the beginning of time management, is her, with my assistance, showing her how it can be done, but also showing her other ways that it can be done that might not necessarily be great for me, but I don't know that they wouldn't work for her. So far, a lot of my ways work for her, and she likes it, and she becomes very productive. The idea also of doing this, of showing her little by little each day, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, that in the end, I mean, if she gets down on herself, I just walk over and show her how much she has done by measurement of inches of work, because I keep everything that she does, especially her math, since we take it out. There's no math lost here. As soon as she's done with her math, I 3-hole punch it and shove it in the binder, in the math binder. And it's growing little by little, little teeny page. You can't even measure the width of that page. But over time, it becomes inches of math. And so she is knowing that being regularly productive in small ways creates a tsunami. And that, I think, showing where you've come from and where you are is visually important for anybody. It's super important for me, and it's really helpful for kids to really see where they've come from. So this, attached to her self-tracking, is super important. So her time management, but also there's mind management. And what do I mean by that? Well, everybody needs to focus. And I teach Morgan how to focus because I focus. And I spend a lot of time thinking about a thing or reading a thing. And she sees me do that. And she realizes that if you want to do something, it might take a little while to do it. Or, reading 12 pages a day. I just watched a video on what happens if you read 12 pages a day of a classic that you're not really into, or that's really going to, it's that thick, and just looking at it is so daunting. But what if you take it in just 12 pages a day? Well, you'll finish it. But then you won't just have torn through it. You will have deeply read it if you only read a few pages a day, because then you've got the rest of the time to stop and consider and thoughtfully maybe talk about the subject, which is also where Waldorf comes in. With her mind management, being able to sit down for a period of time and do that small thing each time teaches her that she's going to get somewhere. But also she has to create her own environment. So we know that we like to be quiet here when we learn. And sometimes, like kitchen noises, we all love kitchen noises. If I'm in here studying or doing something and I hear somebody clinking and clanking in the kitchen, it to me is not distractive. It's actually very a homey feeling. But then if, for instance, Morgan and her stepdad are bantering and laughing and the dog is running around, and that can be more distracting. So we know that when somebody is focusing, everybody else is appreciative of that and allows that person some quiet time, just the way we would afford it to them as well. So Morgan is learning that she has control over her own mind and her own person and her own environment to create those things that are conducive to learning. And that is a huge study skill. And I think lastly, is having a study buddy. So Morgan doesn't, she's an only kid, right? So she doesn't have somebody necessarily to study with, except I am her study buddy. So when she's studying, I will sit down with her and I will sit and do notes or talk about the subject with her, or we will talk back and forth. My sister did that with me. She's 2 years older than me. And while her geography was 2 years ahead of mine, we still had the same teacher. And she already had done my geography. And so if I had a question, essentially she was my study buddy. So that is what I provide Morgan also. I think to have somebody to study with, and not just for a mom, a homeschool mom, to be the teacher, but also the study partner to the child. I think that's important. Okay, another question is, what about computer science, programming, and science lab? Do you plan to cover those topics? So I've got a couple answers. So I'm going to move computer science and programming off to the side and talk about science lab. Science lab is going to be a big deal, and you will see that in the near future. Next year, our science is botany, and we will have labs. In fact, we'll do live. I don't think it's a surprise. We'll do next year's live education. We'll start it at the beginning of summer because that's my growing season. So I used to be a market farmer, and now I just have a big glorious garden that I love and I do whatever I want with. And so we have a small orchard, a fruit orchard and a berry patch, and Morgan she already grows things. We will take a lot of cuttings, we'll do a lot of saving of things, we'll discuss botany by way of backyard gardening first, and then a lot of things we will take and save so that when we do our botany lesson in the fall, we can have things on a microscope slide that we can actually see. We also have a heated shop. Pretty much everybody in North Dakota has a heated shop, and that's where the tractor is. And my husband has his own ham radio situation going on out there. It's super cool. And I've got my own space. And so what we'll do is create a lab environment so that we're not doing kitchen science anymore, but actual lab science. And I will do the filming of some of our classes out there as well so that you can see that. And then the first part of that question was, what about computer science and programming? I don't have any plans to do that yet or in the near future at all. We are a hardware family rather than a software family. So my dad was a computer guy, and he maintained the systems and could actually fix them. And so we've always had computers and we've always messed around with them. But I don't see that as something that my kid needs right now. And I find that the benefits of not being on a computer outweigh the benefits of learning programming right now. And that may change. Everybody is different, but that's just where we are right now. See, I had to get my laptop for the other questions. I'd love to know how you plan your own time. I like to curate my own curriculum, but I really need to carve out my own time. How do you do this as a mom, teacher, facilitator? I have the answer that I wrote in the comments when you asked this question. However, I'm going to give you something else that I didn't want to write down because I don't want anybody to take it wrong, but this is my life's motto. I do whatever I want, whenever I want, for however long I want to do it, and without guilt. So I know that sounds anathema for a mom, even a woman, because we frequently feel guilty if we don't do stuff for other people. But here's how I see it. If I don't show my kid that I can get stuff done and that I can have no guilt over allowing myself to have my own time to do my own thing, if I don't show her that, then how will she do that when she gets older? And so so I guess this requires this answer a little bit of personal background info. For the first 5 years of Morgan's life, I was a single mom by choice. And I had been in a career field that really was not conducive to a woman having children at all. Men could have children. There were no women in my job there that had children at all. If they did, they didn't make it. They'd be out in about a year. So I was really good. By the time I decided I wanted to have Morgan, I was really good at time management and running my own show and doing my own thing. And I had tenure in my own job. I traveled. I essentially had already carved out my career and my success, and I was comfortable and secure. So I didn't fit the single mom statistics. I didn't have 2 jobs. I wasn't struggling. And so when I had Morgan, a lot of people were really worried, and many, strangely, people who didn't even know me would openly tell me how sorry they felt for me because I was a single mom and that must have been so hard. But in fact, it was the easiest thing in the world. Not only was Morgan probably a really easy baby, but I managed our time really, really well. And it was just me and Morgan. So she saw how I did things, and she saw that even as a toddler walking around, that if I was focused quietly, she needed to be focused quietly. And by the time she was 2, she could go into the refrigerator and get her own snack. There wasn't anything in there that she couldn't eat that wasn't good for her. So she did that. And I haven't done her laundry in 4 years. So by the time she was 6, she was already dragging her own dirty laundry down the hallway, washing it, drying it, dragging it back to her room, folding it and putting it away. So there are things that I have done in training that have caused me to now have a ton of time. I have loads of time. And I don't feel guilty about that at all, because when Morgan gets older, I don't want her to feel guilty that her time is hers. And she shouldn't have to carve it out of somebody else's and feel like someone else is being inconvenienced because I'm taking time or she's taking time for herself. This should be a number one rule for all of us, especially for women, that, women's lib doesn't mean anything unless we actually do something about it. I have a lot of time to do what I want. And then one of you had said that you'd be really interested in knowing what I read for fun and what I do for my own self-education. So this is kind of it. What I'm doing, what you see is what you get for pretty much. This is my education. I'm really getting a grade school diploma here and then probably a high school diploma on top of that. But this is what I'm doing, and all of the things that I'm reading, I will show you. And I will continue to show you as well. But on top of that, Waldorf education has kind of made me think that I might want to go back to college later on. I think maybe after, when Morgan is in high school, perhaps go back to university for a fine arts degree, maybe for a philosophy degree, maybe for a math degree. I don't know, maybe all 3 of those things. Or I can just self-study. But, and then one of you also wrote that you believe homeschool to be an extension of the mother's desire to continue her education. And I will say, I totally agree with that, because even if it's not the case when you go into homeschooling, it totally becomes the case. You are a major learner in this process along with your kids. And I don't plan on giving that up. I would like not to give that up. So I really do look forward to teaching high school and learning along with Morgan. I think that would be a great way to go. If she's interested, that's what we will do. So that's the Q&A. Shall we move on to something else? This December we did the Kalevala, and I'll show I had to give up the book. I think I showed it in the beginning of December, the Kalevala book that we read by Ursula Sanj. I wanted to buy the book, but it seems to be out of print. I'm glad that I did an interlibrary loan to get the book, because it was really, really, really good and really fun to read. But buying it used was like $150, and then I just didn't feel like doing that. So I don't have the book anymore, but I don't know. I may cave and buy the book used. Probably what I'll do is its own video on the Kalevala, but we really enjoyed it. And I had asked Morgan how she felt about Waldorf, and without prompting, she said that she thinks it's so cool because she remembers what we learn because we talk about it so much, and then we have to write about it ourselves. And so that was completely unprompted, which I thought was really weird, but pretty cool. So we're going to continue with Waldorf, and that's what we did with the Kalevala. We didn't do too much outside of that, outside of the book itself, because we were winding down for December, but we did a lot of artwork for it, and we did the write-ups and talked about it. That was enough. For math, Morgan is finishing in about a week. She'll be done with Delta, so we'll have begun and finished Math UC Delta so far, and we're moving on to Epsilon. And if you remember one of my videos, there's 2 workbooks here. Because there will be 2 students in math from now on. I'm really bad with fractions, and I think it's really important for you guys to know my weaknesses as well, but then I'm okay talking about them, and it's really important for me to overcome them. I don't have any learning disabilities that preclude me from doing that. And And I know some of you have learning disabilities and you find ways around them. It can be outschooling. It can be getting somebody like a spouse to help you as well. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. Barring any of that, I kind of feel like I need to get smarter on what I kind of didn't pay attention to in school or what I've never been really comfortable with. And so I had very quickly transitioned to a calculator and gotten away from having to learn math myself the old school way. So Morgan and I now will be students together from here on out. So after Epsilon, here's the deal though with Math UC. I've really loved Math UC. It's worked so well for Morgan that I had planned to just use Math UC without thinking about it. I just thought that after Zeta, there's pre-algebra and then algebra, then algebra 2 and geometry. Math UC goes all the way to calculus. Here's the thing, as I was pre-planning, so for next year, Morgan would be in Zeta, and then if she had finished Zeta in the 6th grade, I was going to move her into the pre-algebra Math UC book. So as I was doing a flip through of that, I noticed that it's a little different at the pre-algebra stage, and that is that the quizzes are multiple choice. And I don't like multiple choice quizzes for math. I think that they have a place when you are state testing thousands, if not millions of students. I think that that's kind of the way you have to do it. Except in England, many of my exams were subjective, and then the essays would be, and the work would be sent away to unbiased teachers who would grade and then plug that into the system. But there is a time and a place for multiple choice, and it is not in math for Morgan. So I'm presented with a new problem that I didn't see coming. That means that while we've loved Math UC, and we will do Zeta, we'll do Zeta after Epsilon. But after that, I believe I need another math program for Morgan, and it still does need to stick with a mastery approach rather than spirals. So I've been looking at Beast Academy, and I'm not sure if we will start to kind of merge one into the other, the way we did with Saxon into Math UC last year in the 4th grade. We may need to begin to merge Beast Academy with Math UC. Beast Academy is considered for, I think, math for advanced kids. So that's something I need to think about also. We're not advanced math people here. That's okay. I also think that it may be okay to use advanced math program for a non-advanced math kid. I don't know. Maybe that just means we need to go slower. But also, after grade school Beast Academy, it turns into the art of problem solving. And so what I think I might do is buy the books used to flip through. And I already have bought Beast Academy books used to see if I like them. So I got these just for a couple bucks on thrift books for, they cost nothing. So I got what did I get? The guide as well as the practice workbook. And the practice workbook is used. I mean, every answer is in here from some other kid. But what I wanted to see is how it was laid out. And it is mastery with much more logic than Math UC. So clean pages, it talks to a subject for a good length of time before it moves on to the next one, and it builds on itself. So that is the definition of mastery. We may start with Beast Academy next year and then move into, when we're finished with Zeta, see how we feel about moving into the art of problem solving pre-algebra. I don't know, but now it's a problem that I need to kill. So I will kill it. Let's talk about reading. So we did some really fun books, and I've done something a little different with my books recently, because everything that I'm reading lately, except for one thing, is to assess if I want Morgan to read it and when I want Morgan to read it. So let's see, I'll do her books first. She went off and did a few things that I didn't know. In December, we read The Alchemist together, and it was really good. And then if you remember from one of my videos, this is an article or an essay on The Alchemist is shallow but inspirational. And so I talked to Morgan about this. We read it after The Alchemist, after I asked what Morgan thought about The Alchemist. and kind of did a comparison and did we agree or disagree with what the author suggested about the book. So that was kind of neat. But also I had a note here that saying that the book ended up fitting really well with some of our learned history and geography already with the story of the world. And it really helped Morgan learn a little bit about the Hajj and Mecca and Islam and Christianity and the whole Mediterranean area and how those cultures and languages and religions merge very well and sometimes not very well with each other. The next book that we did that was on my list was Tomorrow When the War Began. This is an okay book. It's okay. So if you don't know about this book, if you watched the 80s movie Red Dawn, this was mirrored after Red Dawn, the movie, but this takes place in Australia and it's good, but halfway through it kind of stalls. It's adult too. It's like YA adult stuff where the book focuses on their relationships and sometimes their sexual relationships, and really bogs down the book because we wanted to read it for let's get on with the end of the world scenario because we're really interested in that. Who's taking over Australia? We want to know who and how and why. And so it does get back on track. And I think there's 2 more books. I'm not sure if we're going to follow suit. John Marston is, this is a well thought of book and it's on a lot of lists. We read it and it was okay. But Morgan had seen me with Elena Ferrante's book, My Brilliant Friend. And then I read the other 2 of her books, but I kind of fizzled out and I didn't read the 4th one. But Morgan was really interested in the idea of the 2 girls in Italy growing up together, that's the premise is you can read the book like a junk novel, like an airport junk novel really easily, or you can really read deeply into the book. And having grown up in Europe, I see a lot of things in Elena Ferrante's writing that really hold true to families that I have known, and that was interesting to me. So I am letting Morgan listen to the book along with me. So what we are doing is, the book is actually a show too. So it's 4 seasons, and each season was one of Elena Ferrante's books. So I'm only going to let Morgan watch the first season because the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th season is too much at her age. So what we're doing is since I've watched the show already, I'm marking where each episode ends and we're listening up to that point in the book. We talk in depth about the book and there's a lot of imagery in there. There's a lot going on in the book behind everybody's visage. And so we talk about that and then I watch the show with her. But I've already talked to Morgan. I'm happy to let her read all of the books if she wants, just not now. So that's also what she is doing and covering. Also, Alicia, I forgot to cover the books that Morgan had read on her own. She's listened to a couple of books. Her brother-in-law bought her this book at Barnes & Noble when she was visiting. I am really impressed with her. So here she is right now here. So she's read quite a lot. What I want to do is compare where she was around this time last year. And I picked Zoe and Sassafras because we still have the books and we just love them. Zoe and Sassafras is just one of our favorite reads from way back when. And this, if you know the books, they're really nice chapter books with great pictures too. But this is an example of, this is about what Morgan could do last year on her own. She would get absolutely exhausted. And I was doing a lot of read alouds or shared reading with her. But now, this is where she is. And this is where she is. So if there's ever a time to kind of be able to visually compare, to say where have we been, how far have we come, this is it. And so I'm really encouraged by this, and it shows me, it tells me directly that what we are doing is working. Everybody is different, but our way is the right way for us. And another thing, Morgan read a ton of this to me when I was trying to organize everything you see in the back. It's funny, I spent hours reorganizing it and all end up looking the same. But she sat here in this swivel chair and read jokes and riddles to me, and that was really, really fun. So it was a fun book. And then things that I hadn't realized she had was, what a great mom I am. Okay, so she has been listening to Throne of Glass. Actually, she already listened to it. And she's finished, wait a minute, is that one the first one? No, I think the first one is The Assassin's Blade. So she listened to and finished The Assassin's Blade in December. She listened to and finished Throne of Glass, and she's on to the next one. They're YA books for more like teens, but she's fine. It's okay. I've listened to them all and read them all. I think they're all in the back, actually, right here. If I can get my finger to move in the right way. I have all of them because I read all of them this time last year. And so she's listening to them, and she's perfectly fine doing that. Morgan's spelling and my spelling is not that great, but her vocabulary is quite robust. And we like playing with words. We like making up words. And so when I found these, I thought, you know what? I really want to integrate these. I have the highly selective dictionary for the extraordinarily literate. And then I got attached to that is the highly selective dictionary for golden adjectives, and it's thesaurus. It's really funny. And what I envision is opening this up and oh, look, defenestration. Oh, how ironic. I was just thinking of that word today. There's so many strange words in here, but also many that you might know. And I think that would be a really fun way to expand our vocabulary without a vocabulary actual curriculum, I think, and just take this on Fridays and read it to each other and pick and choose funny words and then see who can use those words in a sentence throughout that week or whatever. But we're doing really well with vocabulary, and I want to keep it fun. And for this reason, I think that's why I'd like to go with these. So I found these, and we'll see how that goes. Now, something that I have been doing recently is, in order to screen books for Morgan, I don't want to forget what I've written, but I also don't want to put it on some file that I have to look up. If I'm looking at the book, does that mean I have to go find the file or whatever? I've been pasting them in the inside of the book so that as soon as I'm done with the book, I write my own opinions and my own ideas of how good the book is, and if I want Morgan to read it, if it should be on a mandatory read list, and if so, why, and what age. So I've started doing that, and it's really helpful. I've been doing that in all of the books. This is one that I also read, Philip Wiley's The Disappearance. So good. And I didn't know that it was going to pair really, really well with Charlotte Perkins Gilman's Herland. And I encourage people, if you read one, you better read both. It's so good. And I think you could pair these two with, what did I say, Utopia. Yeah, so Thomas More's Utopia. If you read Thomas More's Utopia, Herland, and then The Disappearance, I think that would be great. A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. This was a shocker. I thought this would be a real happy, quick, simple read, and it's kind of a smack in the face over how you think you're perceived as somebody visiting an island and how islanders perceive you. It's a short read, it's a dense read, and so I had thought Morgan could read this perhaps in her senior year, quietly and thoughtfully. It's short, but it's not something that you want to just zip through. You want to really sit and think on it. And then I did read Out of Africa. That was on my list. And then I watched the movie. It's interesting because I'm trying to think, is this one of these cases where the movie is actually better than the book? I think this book is okay. I don't think it's great literature, but I think it's okay. But what did shock me was Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome. This is a horror book. The last chapter to me is just horror. The end of what happens to the people, and it's creepy. And there's so much wrong with the people in this book, probably because they married at too young an age and they don't know any better. So this was a frustrating book for me to read. There's a lot of cliches in here that probably weren't cliches when Edith Wharton wrote them, but they are now. For instance, when two people lean forward towards the milk jug and their fingers touch accidentally, that's an eye roller, but it probably wasn't back then. Am I going to have Morgan read this? Yeah, I don't know. It's short. Maybe she could listen to it. But there's a reason for why you want to read some books that aren't that great, or even if it's considered literature, but you don't like them that much. Because I have some things to say that are negative about them, and also I can compare to other books. Maybe that's why substandard books, in my opinion, may end up on Morgan's read list, because I want her to use them in a certain way. So that's where I'm going with that. And then also I had shown you Bombay Time is one of the books that I was thinking about reading. It's okay. It's a quick read. It's essentially a whole bunch of middle-aged people at a party looking back. It's a massive flashback, and I don't really like flashbacks, but every chapter is a flashback. So every time you get to another chapter, you have to flash back from somebody else's life and start all over again. And to me, that's sort of tedious. But in the end, it's kind of a sweet read. I learned some stuff in here, though. So with culture, there's some really interesting things in here that made me happy that I read it. And then I spent some time with art this break. I know one of you had specifically asked, well, what do you do with your time, or how do you manage your time, and what is it that you do when you're learning for your own purpose? And so I got a bunch of these out of the library. The Urban Sketchbook Handbook, Understanding Perspective, How to Sketch People, Beautiful Landscapes, the Collage Workbook, Collage with Color. Actually, there's only one thing that I like in this book. It's because I'm a gardener that makes me like this book. But when I take photographs of my vegetables, I would love to do a collage of my vegetables. So maybe I'll do that this summer. The Art of Botanical Drawing. I thought Morgan would like that one. Drawing Landscapes. A Beginner's Guide to Sketching. And Drawing Figures. Another book that I read, Morgan wanted, because I'm always giving Morgan books to read. When we were in Barnes & Noble, she said, can I give you a book? Can I choose a book for you to read? And so, well, yeah, sure, why not? So she picked Angela Sanders' Witch and Famous. Without knowing anything about it, I didn't give her any parameters. I didn't say, oh no, I don't want to read that book. She just went somewhere around Barnes & Noble and picked a book, probably because it's a pretty book, and also because we have a really nice tub like this, and we have a black cat like this, and we love to read, and so we like the witchy Hallmarky shows that we like to watch together. There's so much going on here. It's a disaster. This is crazy. This book is nuts. It's a good airport junk novel. And so when I was finished reading it, Morgan said, well, what was it like? And as I was explaining it to her, she started shaking her head laughing, and she said, I'm so sorry, Mom. But the thing that I like about this is I would never have read this. That's why I like when people give you a book of, here, try this, or here, try that. Maybe you'll hate it, but maybe you'll be open to a new genre. And so also this is the third in a series, and it's not literature. It's not something that I would have picked, but I'm glad that I read it because it's so crazy. It made me laugh. It really made me laugh. And another book that I read was Stolen Legacy. I didn't know what I would think about it. I went in not having reviewed it at all or looked into the background of it. And I'm glad I didn't, because I was able to make my own assumptions, which were right. I think that it's got an interesting premise, but it's not founded properly. It reads like somebody's dissertation. Essentially, it's the idea that all of Greek philosophy was stolen from the Egyptians pretty much around the time Alexander the Great was around, because he took from the libraries, and all of those people under Alexander the Great took the books or copied them and brought the philosophy that we now have to Greece and penned it as their own. There are some flaws in the argument. So it's another example of how I don't think it's the best book to read as factual, although it probably could be in many ways. But because it's flawed, it would be interesting to read, to then critique it and discover for oneself if something is right or wrong. And then for our 100 list, where are we now? We have 17 for our classics out of 100, so I'm pretty sure we're going to go over 100 eventually. And we added to Tomorrow When the War Began, and I put My Brilliant Friend on there, and The Alchemist. I'll upload it and show you. It'll change, and I think it's interesting, because if I completely erase everything and change it all up, it's okay. It's not cheating. It's a living list that's just going to morph according to how I need it and want it to morph. Okay, so very soon I will share my top 100 nonfiction. And I've talked a little bit about how much more troublesome this is. I don't know why, it just is. So here's an example. On the same list, there's Bananas, How the United Fruit Company Shaped the World, right next to The Market Gardener, right next to The Sword and Shield, right next to the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, because I think that's an important book to read, and The Feminine Mystique. So it's all over the place, and there's so many and so much, I'm not sure how to, in fact, there's got to be more than like the classics. And so I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll talk about it probably in its own video, and then just slowly build it, take things away, add to it as I go, just like the 100 classics list. Now, where are we with unit studies? We're doing pretty good, but one thing that I have already done is that what goes along with our traveler's notebook is I bought a matching little binder so that when we're done with books inside our notebook, we can file them in here. And so Morgan's done with hers. This is a first semester schedule, and this is my first semester schedule. It's just really neat to keep mementos, and we want to keep these. And later on, I will put our yearly book in here, which Morgan doesn't have one, but I do. And that has our attendance and unit studies and everything. And I'll file that in here too. So essentially every year we will have 5 books. So 1 each of a semester. So that'll be 4 books. And then my year-long book. So every one of these will be 1 year, and this one will read the 5th grade. And I'll put the unit studies in there. So let's look and see where we are with unit studies. Here we are. We finished the first portion of geography. We'll do the second portion this semester. We didn't do man and animal because in lieu of that, we were doing the ferret PBL. Morgan wanted to do her own military unit study, and we did a week of sex ed. So we really kind of focused on that, although we do talk about that pretty much on Fridays. We took that whole week to talk about kind of some fundamentals. And then we did our Norse mythology, we did the Kalevala, and our pop-up bakery. We didn't finish the pop-up bakery because, well, quite honestly, we all got sick of cookies. And what Morgan did instead was she did the whole marketing aspect. She did all of the baking and the test baking and the branding. And then she baked a whole bunch. She packaged all of them up and then gave them out as Christmas presents instead of doing the second half, which would be then the advertising and sales and delivery. So that's a good lesson learned. We were kind of already winding down in December. So that's where we left the pop-up bakery. So now we're left here with January, and we were going to do Beowulf and the Plague, but I've decided to take the Plague off the list. And it's a PBL that I really want to do. I really like the PBLs. In fact, I'll probably buy them all now because one thing that I would like to do is make an entire 1-credit course, high school course, based off of the PBLs. But I'm realizing also that I had moved us to Waldorf education after I purchased the curriculum for 5th grade. And so I'd had to take some of the curriculum off. And I'm also realizing that I don't want to rush everything. So the Plague can wait. The Plague can move on, and we can do that in the 9th grade very easily. And Beowulf is another story. And instead of doing another story, what I want to do is move Man and Animal, since we had missed it at the very beginning of the year. I'd like to move Man and Animal to January, so that's what we're going to do this month. And then we'll do Beowulf, then we'll do more geography, and then Man and Animal. And in that way, we'll have completed the Waldorf education and really gotten our feet wet with live education and how it works, because I don't think it's any surprise that we'll be doing the next one too. And then let's look and see how we're doing for attendance, because I think that's kind of fun to see where everybody is. Down below, I show on the top portion how many days we worked in the month, and then the bottom is the total. So here we are in December, and we did 16 days of school. For a total, we finished out the semester with 86 days. And then this last week, we've been doing the half days that I had planned, and then we'll kick off to full-time school for the rest of this January. Now, I had already talked about creative writing, and we'll continue to do that. I just think it's just so important to continue the way we're doing it, a couple of pages every morning, freestyle, different topics each time. And I think over time, through the 6th grade, and then the 7th grade, and then the 8th grade, it will become something other than what it is now, but based off of how we've started now. So I think that's really good. And then I'll do a quick flip through of I'm going to flip through my art. So I'm going to show you my art journals because I've just started art and I want you to know that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to enjoy doing something that you might not be good at and to continue practicing it. And that's what I like Morgan to see me do. Morgan's got the exact same one. So she has an art journal exactly like mine and she's doing the very similar things to me, but I'll show you mine because I think art is kind of like writing or her own work is pretty personal. And for instance, the journal, essentially what she writes in here is her own writing. And I won't do a flip through of that, but you get the idea of what she's doing and how we're doing it. And I'll end with that by giving you a flip through. I spend a good couple of hours sketching or reading one of my sketchbooks to learn how to do something better. And what I found is when I do that at the kitchen table, Morgan begins to do the same thing. So she comes to the table, she gets her watercolor water, she gets her colors out, and she begins to paint and she begins to design as well. And I love that because it's a way also to spend time together without, necessarily staring at each other, but have those conversations and not be around a screen, not be around social media. And I really like that because some things that I like Morgan to learn is how to use her time cheaply and wisely and without feeling like she has to spend a lot of money. I think, for instance, going for a jog is fantastic and cheap and something that she can do when she's, I don't know, living overseas one day in the middle of nowhere. She doesn't have any friends, but she can absolutely go for a run, or she can do her own art. And maybe that's how she meets people that way. So these are things that she can take with her out of this house and develop along the way as she goes. Not every part of homeschool has to be geared towards college or an exam, but there are a lot of parts of homeschool that are about life and living. And some people don't think that that counts, but I do. I believe that that's really, really important. I'm growing an adult. I'm not just growing a kid to go to college. And so that's kind of where we are now. All right. That was long again, probably. Thanks for watching, and it's good to be back, you guys. I'll see you later.